Hi, I'm Mark from Skill Sprints, where we're dedicated to helping you learn new digital skills. Today, we're diving into the world of Google Sheets, a tool that can turn daunting data into decisions and chaos into order. Imagine being able to manage your projects, finances, and data analysis with a few clicks and keystrokes. Sounds magical, right? Well, today, I'm going to show you that it's not magic, it's Google Sheets. By the end of our time together, you're going to be able to use Google Sheets to automate tasks, simplify your work, and make sense of those numbers. Whether you're looking to enhance your productivity, take on new challenges, or just get down and dirty, you've come to the right place. We'll embark on this digital journey together. Let's start by reviewing some Google Sheets basics. We'll start by accessing Google Sheets at sheets.google.com. Then from this page, which shows our history and gives us the option to start new spreadsheets, I'm going to choose Blank Spreadsheet. Like all other spreadsheet tools, Google Sheets organizes data into columns with labels A, B, C, D, and so on, and rows numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. Before we type any data into our sheet, let's name our sheet. I'm going to click where it says Untitled Spreadsheet, and type the word sales to name the sheet. Since Google Sheets is a cloud-based application, you don't have to constantly save. Your data is saved in the cloud in your Google account. To enter data into any cell, I simply select the cell and then type the data. Let's type some labels for our columns. Name, January sales, so now we have labels for 5 columns. I can enter data directly underneath the labels. If my column isn't wide enough to accommodate the data, I can adjust by mousing over the line between the columns and dragging right and left. Let's finish entering the data for this row. Now this is starting to come together. Let's select our data and add a currency format. I'll do that by clicking the $sign in the toolbar. At this point, we need to determine the quarterly total for the sales for this particular salesperson. Now, of course, we could whip out a calculator and add them all together, but that defeats the point of a spreadsheet. We can either use a formula or a function here. A formula is a simple mathematical formula that we put together as the user. A function can be part of a formula, but the mathematics are predetermined. There are dozens and dozens of functions available within Google Sheets. The function we'd want to use in this particular case is sum. So we can sum the data in these 3 cells by using the sum function. Every function will start with the equal sign, and there you can see a drop-down list of functions that are relevant based on what I typed. We're simply going to use sum, and then we need to provide it with the arguments or the values that I'm summing. I'm essentially summing a series of cells, also known as a range of cells, from C4 to E4. And there is our function. It essentially says, sum the cells outlined in orange, C4 through E4. That's our range. When I press enter, you'll see the result is $581,000. Let me add 2 more rows of data. Let's format the data as currency. And let's repeat the process of using the sum function for row 5, where the sales representative is Mary Gold. So we're going to use sum, and this time we're summing from C5 through E5. Notice I got my range simply by dragging over the range of cells in this case. For the last rep, Greg Gold, let's use a formula so you can see the difference between a function and a formula in Google Sheets. Formulas also start with the equal sign. In this case, instead of typing sum, I'm going to create the mathematical formula, which is C6 plus D6 plus E6. The result still gives us the sum, but we had to do the math ourselves. Notice if you look in the formula bar, where we place the formula sum in rows 4 and row 5, you see equals sum and then the range. Where we use the formula in row 6, you can see the formula in the formula bar. Now let's add a wrinkle to this. Let's add a bonus rate. And let's say that bonus rate is 0.15 or 15%. And if I want to calculate the bonus rate, I'm going to multiply the quarterly total by the bonus rate. We know how to do that. Equals quarterly total multiplied by the bonus rate, $87,150. If I copy and paste this formula from cell to cell, watch what happens. That doesn't look like that worked too well. Here's why. Let's look in the formula bar. F5, which is correct, times G2. Well, that's incorrect because the bonus rate is in G1. The problem is we're using relative cell references. So if we copy and paste, the copy and paste will use the position of the cell relative to the source. So if we move down one row, everything moves down one row, which is why it looked for the bonus rate in G2 instead of G1. Here's how we fix that. It's called an absolute cell reference. Let's go to our formula and let's change it to G1, but make it an absolute reference. $G, $1. That makes both the row and the column absolute. Now, not only do we get the correct value for G5 for Marigold, but if we were to copy and paste again, I'm going to ignore this suggestion, Command C to copy, Command V to paste, notice we again get the correct value. And what was pasted into the cell is the absolute value for the bonus rate, $G, $1. That reference didn't move. However, the reference to the quarterly total did move down to line 6. Let's look at all three formulas. So in row 4, it's F4 times G1. This is where we used our absolute reference, so it's F5. We move down a row times $G, $1, and then F6 times $G, $1. So we're using absolute and relative references together to get the correct result. Now, let's look at some essential functions that are used in Google Sheets. I've created some new data that will enable us to look at some of the functions that are available within Google Sheets. By the way, if you want to see all the functions in Google Sheets, you can click Functions from the toolbar, and it'll show you all the functions that are available. As I mentioned, there are dozens and dozens of functions. They are separated into a few different categories. For example, if you wanted to work with financial functions, you could click the Financial section of the Functions dropdown, or Statistical Functions here. As I mentioned before, we can easily sum a range of values with the sum function. In this case, we're summing from B2 to B9. We can just as easily get an average by using the average function. We're going to be using the same range, B2 to B9. I can just press Tab to accept the range that Google Sheets suggests. I can use the count function to count the number of cells that contain numbers. So if I use count, and let's say I chose A2 through C9, all of the data except the headings. The result of that is 8, because of those cells, only 8 of those cells contain numerical values. If I want to count the number of non-blank cells, I can use count A. That's simply the number of values in a data set. So if we select, for example, A2 through A9, it sees that there are 8 salespeople. However, if I remove one of the names, notice that value turns to 7 or 6. As I replace the names, the number of values goes up. I can find a minimum and maximum fairly easily too. Now remember, we're doing this with a small set of data, But imagine if there were hundreds of rows of data. You could use the same formulas, but you couldn't as easily determine the result just by eyeing the data. So let's create labels for minimum sales and maximum sales. So here we're going to use minimum, and then our range is going to be B2 through B9. So the minimum there is 120. Those are Jordan's sales. And our maximum is going to be 620, which are Riley's sales. Now, suppose I was creating a dashboard where I wanted to look up data from a data set. Again, you have to visualize a larger set of data here to understand why this is important. But VLOOKUP will give us the tool to do a lookup. Let's try it. So let's say in our little dashboard, we're going to look up a salesperson, and we're going to see the amount of sales that that salesperson has. If I were just to type Morgan here, our formula would look up Morgan and give us his or her sales. So I'm going to use VLOOKUP. And you notice this has a number of arguments: the search key, the range, the index, and is sorted. So the VLOOKUP search key is going to come from cell A19. That's got the name we're looking up. The next argument is the range. That's the range of data that we're going to be working with. In this case, A2 through C9. Then is the column that contains the result that we want. So in this case, the salesperson is in column 1 and the sales are in column 2. And finally, false, this is not sorted data. And notice Morgan gives us the result 480. If I were to change the name to Charlie, that gives us 390. Or Riley, that gives us 620. Let's try this again, also looking up the region of the salesperson. Same concept. We're going to use VLOOKUP, which stands for vertical lookup. By the way, if your data is oriented horizontally, there's an HLOOKUP for horizontal data. Same idea. So the search key, again, is going to be in cell A19, because we're looking up by the actual name of the salesperson. Our range is the same, A2 through C9. But this time, the index is column 3, because we're looking for the region. And again, data is not sorted. So is that correct? Riley is 620 west. Charlie is 390 east. Alex is 350 east. And Taylor is 550 east. By the way, if I put a name that doesn't exist in the lookup, we're going to get NA, or not available error, in the resulting cells. Let's go ahead and put a name that exists, Morgan. If logic allows our spreadsheet to react based on whether or not some condition is true. Let's go ahead and create if logic with the if function. So let's say in this case, if the sales are over 500 units, the salesperson gets a bonus. So I'm going to add a bonus column. I'm going to format it the same as the previous columns in the row. Let's go ahead and copy region. Select the cell what we want to format, and I'm going to choose Edit, Paste Special, Format Only. Now its format is identical to the other cells. Now on to our if function. The if function essentially has 3 parts. The first argument of the if function is the condition. This is evaluated as either true or false. If it's true, we do what's in the second argument. If it's false, we do what's in the third argument. Watch. We said in order to get the bonus, sales have to be over 500. So sales are in B2, greater than 500. This will evaluate to true if sales are greater than 500 and false otherwise. So if true, let's put the text bonus. And if false, let's put the text no bonus. And there's our function. Again, 3 arguments. First is the condition. In this case, that condition is going to be false. Next is what we do if it's true, and then what we do if it's false. In this case, it should say no bonus. But let's go ahead and copy this function down through the rows of our spreadsheet. So we'll copy it down 1 row, 2 rows, and let's see the results. So Jordan, whose sales are 120, no bonus. Taylor's sales are 550. Taylor is eligible for a bonus. Morgan, 480, no bonus. Let's go ahead and drag the autofill handle the rest of the way. And there you can see our if statement is pasted into all of these cells. If we go down to row 9, you can see the if statement uses the relative cell position B9 to determine the conditional, B9 greater than 500, and then our true and false arguments. Jamie, whose sales were 410, well, 410 is not greater than 500, so that's false, so the result is no bonus. Sometimes the result we want requires us to use multiple functions or multiple formulas or a combination of the two. Let's see how that works out. I've created a new spreadsheet here and notice that there is a discount column. In order to figure out each employee's gross sales, we need to subtract the discount amount from the sales. So in this case, I'm going to use a formula. Our formula is going to be the sales minus the discount amount, which is determined by multiplying the sales times the discount. I put the parentheses in the formula because B2 times D2, the discount amount, has to be determined before we actually do the subtraction. So the parentheses force that bit of the formula to be executed first. So in this case, after discount, the sales are 315. We can use the autofill handle to paste this formula into each relevant cell in the column. And there you can see the result. For example, for Taylor in row 4, it's B4, that's Taylor's sales, minus B4 times D4, which calculates the discount amount considering Taylor's at a 5% discount. If we were to change Taylor's discount rate to 15, the gross sales would go down. Now we can actually get our total sales. This time we can use sum. E2 to E9 is the correct range. And there you can see our total gross sales are 2828. Now let's say we wanted to get the averages by region. We have 2 regions, East and West. So using average really wouldn't be convenient here. That's why we have average if. So average if has a couple of arguments. The first argument is the range of data. In this case, C2 through C9. What we're looking for in this case is East, which is in cell A12, and then is the range that we're going to average. In this case, the gross sales, E2 through E9. So there you can see our East average is 317. And if we were to use the autofill handle to paste this formula into the next row, the average for West is 414. You can see that in the formula bar, the average if uses the range C13 through C10 to determine whether it's East or West. A13 is what we're looking for. If the average is West, then we're going to average the gross sales, which live in cells E3 through E10. And here you can see by combining formulas and functions, we're getting some pretty advanced results out of our Google Sheets document. I'm Mark from SkillSprints. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.